Welcome to the tutorial video on PHP. In this video I'm going to talk about functions. In programming terminology, we think about functions as some collection of code that does something. Functions are also a way to break up larger projects into smaller tasks. These are things we can send data into and get data out of. And this helps us to better organize our code and more efficiently structure everything. Instead of having large chunks of code that do things, we can have smaller parts that do individual tasks and things that we can use over and over again by sending data into, getting data out of, and having them do repetitive things or small simple tasks. So functions are a way to organize code. In PHP, functions are defined using the function keyword. So let's start here at the top. Lines 1 through 3, we see the function keyword right here, so we know we're defining a function. After that, we see the name of the function. The name of the function follows the same rules as variables within PHP. That is, it can have letters, it can have numbers, and it can have the underscore, but it can't have any spaces, and it can't have any other special characters. So letters, numbers, the underscore. After the name of the function, we have its parameters, sometimes called its arguments in other programming languages. These are things we're sending into the function. So remember I mentioned as a function we can send data in and we can get data back out. So as we're sending data into the function, the data is going to be called something different. It's going to be called whatever the variables are that are within its parameters or within its arguments. I'm going to use both words interchangeably here for those who might be coming from another programming language. So we're sending data into this, and in this case, it's going to be called value. We know it's variable right here because it has the $sign, as a reminder from an earlier video. So we're sending data in, and then we're going to do something. So the body of a function is defined in PHP through the opening and closing curly brackets. So we've got the function keyword, the name of the function, and then its parameters or its arguments. In this case, a single one called value. This will be the data we're sending into it. And the body of the function defined inside the opening and closing curly brackets. In this example, we see the echo keyword because we want to examine value. Value is a variable, and we know right here it is a parameter or an argument. So whatever is sent into this function, we're then going to echo out so we can look at it. This function then is helpfully named print output. Now, there are no rules for naming functions in PHP. You can name them whatever you want. But it's often more helpful and highly recommended to name functions that have to do with their task or what action they are performing. In this case, print output. And I know when I send data in, that's what it's going to do. It's going to print output for us. So let's move down a bit. On lines 5 and 6, we're putting values into two different variables. The first on line 5, we're putting the whole number or the integer 1 into the variable number value. And we know it's a variable because it has a $sign in front of it. Down here on line 6, we're putting the value hello, which is a string, and we know it's a string because it has opening quotations and closing quotations around it. So hello with an exclamation point, we're putting in the variable string value. So we have two variables, each has separate values. Down here on lines 8 and 9, we're finally using the function. In programming terminology, we call this calling a function. That is, we say, hey function, and then sometimes we send it data. These are its parameters or its arguments. So we're calling a function, we're saying, hey, here's some data, go do a thing, or we're saying, hey function, do this for us. In this case, on line 8, we're sending number value. So we're sending the value of this variable, which then becomes the value of the variable value, which then we're doing something with inside this function. So we're sending a value, which then becomes the value of something else, which then gets acted upon. And this is calling a function. So we're saying, hey function, and then we're giving it some data and doing something with it. So on line 8, we're sending number value. On line 9, we're sending string value, calling this function, hey function, and we're giving it some data. Let's move down here and talk about lines 11 through 13 before I run this. So we're defining a new function. We know because the function keyword, it has a name, it has letters or numbers or the underscore, but no spaces or other special characters. It has as a single parameter or a single argument. Number, we know it's a variable because it has a $sign, and so whatever data we send in is going to become the value of number. The body of the function is defined through the opening and closing curly brackets, and within this, we're doing something a little different. So I keep mentioning that functions we can send data into them and we can get data back out. And the first function example, we weren't getting data back out. It was doing something, which was good, but nothing was coming back to us. If we want to get data back out of a function, we use the return keyword. The return keyword returns whatever this value is. That is, we can use functions as part of larger mechanisms, as part of a larger chain of actions to perform something, get the data back out, and then use that return data to do something else. So we see here the return keyword, and we're returning whatever is sent in plus 1. So down here, line 15, we see another variable, which we know it's a variable because it has a $sign in front of it in PHP. And we're setting this to 2. On line 17, we see another number value. Right here was 2, but it's being assigned add 1, and then the value of the variable, another number value. This is where it helps to understand the chain of events that happen here. The first thing that happens is over here on the right-hand side. The value of the variable, another number value, which is currently 2, is sent to add 1. It becomes the value of the variable number. It is then 1 is added to it, so 2 becomes 3. It is then returned, and so this whole thing becomes 3, and is then set to another number value. So another number value moves from 2 to 3 because it is the result of sending the value into a function, getting its result back, and then assigning or putting a value back into that variable. So we see here we can get data back out through using the return keyword. Down here, we see print output, which we saw at the top, and another number value, which we know should be 3 because it was 2. That value was sent into add1, hey function, we were calling it, sending its data, changing it to 3, assigning it to this, changing the value of another number value, and then we're looking at that value here by sending it into print output, hey function, calling that function, sending data into it, and then using echo value. So let's look at that. And it's exactly what we wanted to see. We see 1, which is line 8. We see hello with an exclamation point, line 9. And then finally we see line 19, the result of sending a value into a function, getting data back out of that function, using that data, and then sending it to another function to then look at that data. Again, as I said at the beginning, using a function to break up into smaller tasks and using them for different actions. And we can also chain them together, use all those actions for a common thing, and better organize our code into small parts that do different things for which we can get data, send data to, get data back, and do different things with them. And we do this through defining functions using the function keyword, its name, and in this example, using the body of the function, opening, closing curly brackets, doing something. If we want to get data back out, we're using the return keyword, but we don't necessarily have to do that. So we're sending data in as a parameter or as an argument, depending on what terminology you want to use. Getting data back out, then calling that function, hey function, sending some data to it, getting that data back, and working with functions to divide up our code and more efficiently and effectively organize our structure instead of a whole lot of code, a whole lot of smaller parts that are easier to understand and to maintain. Thanks for watching.